Hi there. My name is Allie Cook, and today I'm here to talk to you about what it's like to work in the cannabis industry and how we go about gaining employment. So first and foremost, let me start by saying that I am a recent alumna of Lake Superior State University, as I just graduated with my honors bachelor's in cannabis business, summa cum laude, as of May 2025. With that academic experience, I also bring over half a decade working in the cannabis space, starting at a medical doctor's office, moving into dispensary management, later into finance. I got to work as an independent contractor for a while, and then now I'm joining a new company, going back to finance where my strengths really lie. So first and foremost, within the cannabis space and getting a job there, no matter what department, let's talk about the most important trait that is going to be needed and will be mentioned at any interview you're at. It's what employers are looking for. I promise you that, as somebody who has had to do hiring in this space and gone through many interviews for jobs within this industry. Adaptability. Now, I know adaptability might not always be everybody's favorite thing. It's really prevalent in jobs in food service, in retail, things of that nature. And a lot of people don't like having to be adaptable because that means things are changing a lot. Everything is fast-paced. You're required to just really be on top of things and to pivot at a moment's notice. And that isn't everyone's cup of tea, but that's okay. But if you want to work in the cannabis industry, it is crucial that you have a certain level of adaptability, and the more adaptable you are, the greater the chance you'll be able to secure employment, especially if you have history to back up that trait. So I used to joke when I managed a dispensary to my family that if I took off 2 days or more consecutively from my job as a bud tender, that when I came back, my entire job would be done different. And while that sounds really dramatic, it's true. There was one time where I was actually in the middle of my shift, and the health department in Florida, where I lived at the time, they came down and said, any bag that leaves your store starting right now, as soon as you read this email, must have this big red triangle on it with a red exclamation point and a big pot leaf. That way everybody knows that every bag leaving your building has cannabis products in it. And if you don't, it is federal trafficking. You are not compliant. You will lose your licensing. You will get fined. All these threats. Really important to follow because you don't want to be the reason that a giant company gets shut down or have any part of that. Plus, you don't want to lose your job. You don't want the company to be shut down. So you have to be compliant. You have to play the game. It's just working in cannabis. It's how it is, the nature of it. Don't hate the player, hate the game, essentially. But it required me to think outside of the box because in addition to things like having to explain to patients why they now had this big branding when the bags before used to be really discreet, talking about safety concerns with now having patients walking in the parking lot to their car that could potentially be mugged or something of that nature because it's super clear that they have weed in their bag. Things like that were really challenging, having to work with staff to make sure that everybody understood the seriousness of this and we were all on the same page with training. In addition, it was just getting the stickers that was the hardest part because we didn't have anything. So for a while, we were just having to print these out on paper, cut it out, tape it on there, and call it a day because that's all we could do until we got the stickers in the mail. That's not always the quickest thing. It's not always the most efficient thing. But nothing in cannabis is always the easiest, quickest, most efficient thing, as we should all probably know at this point, given that you all should have some information and knowledge on cannabis history for this course. So working in an adaptable industry may not be for everyone, but if you like a challenge, you can handle fast-paced, you've worked in food service, retail, anything like that, healthcare, you're going to be well prepared to handle this. It's just not everyone's cup of tea. If you're looking for something very consistent, cannabis might not be the best bet for you. There are some roles that might be a little less or so. Working in finance, as I have for the last 5 or so years, has been very beneficial, honestly, because it's a little bit more consistent day to day. I'm not worrying about changing promotions or new laws or dispensation changes or anything like that. For the most part, it's pretty consistent month over month, and that's nice, and I like that. So if maybe something not overly adaptable is what you're looking for, then you can always look into other departments, but having that experience in retail is going to do you huge favors in the long run, because that has been essentially my secret skill at every interview I've been to and what's made me really stand out as a candidate. But we'll dive into that in just a moment. So now that we've talked about adaptability, what companies like to see as far as what traits their candidates hold, let's talk about how we go about getting a job in the cannabis industry, because, oh my gosh, everybody wants to work in cannabis. And while it's understandable and it's a fantastic industry to work in at times, it is very competitive. I worked at a medical marijuana doctor's office when I first started, because that was the way that I could get my foot in the door. And I was smoking out front with a patient of ours who was branded head to toe in cannabis merch. And he told me, "You seem like you're in the right industry, just the wrong part of it. You should come work for a dispensary." And so I applied. I applied to probably 6 different stores within this big company in Florida. And eventually one of them gave me a chance. Funny enough, they did drug test me before I was able to be employed part-time with them. And while they were looking for the scary drugs, essentially like meth, heroin, cocaine, things of that nature, they were fine with cannabis. So that's the first time I've ever gotten to take a drug test right after smoking cannabis. And that was honestly awesome to go on and be like, yeah, I've smoked weed. I'm high right now. Drug test me. I can tell you what you're going to find in here. And it was hilarious getting the call from them being like, "We found THC in your system." Yeah, I told you you would. They sold it to me. So if they do mention drug tests, please just know that that is not make or break. They're not looking for cannabis, and they are typically a little bit more flexible sometimes when it comes to having a criminal background if they're related to cannabis charges, as long as you're not selling to a minor. That's kind of the no-go, at least in Michigan, from my understanding. So with getting a job, you really have to leverage yourself. You have to be interested and able to kind of take whatever you can get, at least in the beginning. For a lot of people, that's working part-time as a bud tender. And that's okay. We all have to start somewhere. We all have to pay our dues. I had over a decade of management experience when I joined as a bud tender, and I still worked part-time for less than I was worth because it got me in the door. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have had all of the experiences and opportunities that followed. So getting in the door initially with the dispensary, it was the food service and retail background that really helped me stand out as a bud tender. Again, circling back full circle here, adaptability, being fast-paced, being able to multitask, being able to handle things and have that attention to detail and the customer service, this, that, and the other, it made me a prime candidate. So while a lot of people think, oh, I worked at McDonald's, I shouldn't hype that, I shouldn't talk about it, it's not impressive, it's not aligned with what I'm doing, you really have to sit down with your job skills and think, what can I do to really play into this? How are these skills going to cross over and pull into other jobs? So, like I said, for example, with food service, yeah, I might be bartending and maybe that requires me to know all of these different drink recipes. And yeah, maybe I'm not selling alcohol at a dispensary, but that means I know a lot about the products that I serve as a bartender, which is going to help me know a lot about the products that I sell as a bud tender. It could just be being fast-paced, reliable. Again, working in those peak periods. Anything you can do to pull skills from one job to another is going to help you in the long run. And you really have to think critically about it too, because it might not always be so easy to see, but realistically, it's those not always entry level, but those food service and retail jobs that have really helped bump me up and give me an extra leg to stand on, so to speak, simply because it was transferable. They could see the value in what I had learned, even if I was working at a desk and wasn't managing a restaurant. Those things really do interlink when you think about them contextually, perhaps. So don't downplay the value that you have. Speak to yourself, because if you can't market yourself and you don't believe in yourself, why is anybody else going to? And with the amount of competition in this industry, you have to know what makes you special and how to sell yourself. Now, another thing that I noticed that was really big within this space, both while I was hiring for dispensary roles as well as just my personal experience going through these interviews, is the culture, the vibe. Sometimes it's not even about what you know, what degree you have, your experience. It's just you as a person. And I know that a lot of jobs say, oh, we're looking for the right fit. We want someone who gets along great with our team. And yes, that's generally true for just about every job, unless they're hiring for somebody with a heartbeat where they'll take anybody. But in cases like this, because cannabis culture is so unique with stoners and knowing the clientele and consumption, things of that nature, if you haven't already, there's some really great papers you'll read by Howard S. Becker through the more sociologically focused classes that'll really dive into the culture of cannabis consumers. Again, if you haven't already read those, they're fantastic. They're long reads, but they're really cool, honestly. But it's that culture that's really important to these brands, because at least the good ones, because they know it's not just people who can get from point A to point B, but can connect with their customers, connect with their products, and really be what they're about and embody their mission, their vision, their values, all that corporate mumbo jumbo. They want people who can represent the brand and be proud of it and be able to speak to the products and all of that good stuff. So knowing what makes you special helps. Having that good vibe, that good culture fit is going to be imperative to be successful in these interviews. Because obviously, everybody wants everybody to get along, but you also have to know the customers, and you also have to be able to know the products. That said, if you are not a consumer and you're trying to get a job in this space, it's not impossible. I have seen a handful of people, I can't say many, but a handful of people get jobs in dispensary roles when they don't consume, and they do find success, although it's often harder for them simply because they can't try the products. It would be like if you were selling Coca-Cola, but you had never tried it before, and you weren't a soda drinker, you didn't like soda. You can still sell it and speak to it based off of what your customers are telling you, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be as impactful because you don't consume. And I'm not saying that you must do it. It just makes it a lot easier, speaking from experience. So I've actually had employers tell me they specifically look for people who consume, and being asked if you consume cannabis in a state that'll send you to jail for using illegally is honestly wild to have to answer. But it also blew my mind when I said, yes, I used to consume in Illinois, where I had moved from before Florida, but I hadn't been smoking since Florida simply because I didn't have a connection or my medical card yet. And he laughed and said, good, we were wanting to hire somebody who consumes. It's incredible the difference in culture between a traditional job and working in the cannabis space. And that genuineness of the industry, at least at times with certain companies, can do amazing things. Honestly, just internally as well. But it really fosters a neat environment. Now, let's talk about how we're actually going to find these jobs. So you'll find through this path, depending on what courses you've taken already, you might have some exposure to this, but platforms like LinkedIn, so imperative, so important, so critical, so necessary. And I know it feels like a bunch of corporate buzzword mumbo jumbo. It does. It's not great. There's a lot of ChatGPT written posts, things like that. But what I've learned particularly and recently is networking. Networking. Oh my gosh. It makes all of the difference, especially in the cannabis space. Because it's so competitive and because so many people claim to be these experts, it gets hard to really make yourself known when you're a loud and proud advocate. You're taking the time to do research on things like cannabinoids and terpenes and ratios and all this good stuff, when there's all these people that are also vying for the jobs, and then you've got, 500 plus applications for one role, and it just feels hopeless at times. And it's honestly really upsetting that the people who should be in the industry kind of get outshined at times by people who don't even care about the fact it's cannabis. They just want a job in human resources or finance or what have you, especially remote roles. Those are so hard to get right now, especially if you already don't have an in. So I feel that it is incredibly important. Get on your LinkedIn. If you don't have one, make one. If you don't know how to make one, talk to Professor Brady. She is more than happy to help guide you, and she will, again, like I said, in another class, if you haven't taken it already, there will be an assignment relating to LinkedIn at some point in your academic future. And get on there, connect with people, look up brands, see who works for those brands, connect with those people, really start using it to generate these thoughts and start discussions and get engaged. Make posts, talk about things, talk to different people, share your insights, learn and grow, because it's those people that are going to help pull you into those higher roles and bring you along. As I said, I started at Marijuana Doctor back right at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, and that was really stressful, but I got the job, and it helped me navigate the medical system that Florida had in place. And as the largest medical market in the country, that was really important for me to understand, and then gave me an additional edge as I moved into my next role, working and managing a dispensary. Working in that role really helped me get some base roots with the company and build a reputation for myself as who the heck I am. And in doing so, I was then able to get an internal promotion into finance, where I then worked remote for the next 4 years. It allowed me to escape from Florida and come to Michigan, get my degree and all that good stuff, and really get my roots planted in the industry and in finance as well, because I had never really been given a chance before my time with my first cannabis company, the dispensary one. So that was very interesting to kind of navigate, but having that retail experience helped leverage me as a candidate into that role as an accountant and financial analyst for the brand. And I don't know that I would have had that same opportunity to get that job if I wasn't already an internal hire. Now, from there, I unfortunately had been laid off from that job due to a reduction in force. These are very common in the cannabis space, so that kind of unfortunately goes along with the adaptability of you just have to be prepared. Nothing is stable enough with federal illegality, so we just always have to be ready for whatever might happen. That said, from there, I was very active on LinkedIn. I was sharing all of my academic successes with LSSU and my thesis, this, that, and the other. And on the morning of graduation, though I had been laid off 2 days prior from my company after half a decade with them, a cannabis beverage company in Massachusetts reached out and said, "Hey, we've been seeing what you're doing. It's amazing. We're so impressed, and we would love to get to know you more. Let's do some interviews for a job." And I went through several interviews. I got to meet their CEO, which was cool. I really got to know them. And although I didn't get that job because there was somebody else from my company who had been laid off that was in the state they were in. So unfortunately, they had a bit of an edge on me. They ended up circling back and saying, even though you didn't get the job, we don't want to lose you as a candidate. Do you want to come be an independent contractor for us? And that was awesome because it let me keep my feet wet in the cannabis space, even while I had to take another job for the meantime, working at LSSU, to make ends meet. It let me keep my focus aligned and keep those passions alive, even while I did something else to pay the bills that was outside of my degree path. Eventually, I was reached out to on LinkedIn by a former manager of mine from the long-term cannabis company that I worked for, that I'm intentionally not naming. But she reached out and said, hey, I left shortly after you were laid off and I went to big other cannabis company. And I need somebody who is specialized exactly in what you did really well. I want you on my team. Come interview. And I did. And I talked to them and I learned about this position and they offered it to me. And although it was really hard to make this decision and it's scary having to go back into an industry that's such high turnover, I knew that it was right and all of my passions are aligned. And at the end of the day, what brought me back and was able to help me get into this amazing kind of job again was my networking. It was the people that I knew, the people I had worked years with and proved myself to, that remembered me when that opportunity became available. So it's not always the easiest thing, and I do generally hate saying, oh, it's who you know, because it should never be that way. But in the cannabis space, it is a lot about who you know, and having those connections and making opportunities for yourself is going to be the trick at the end of the day to really get that done and get that opportunity and be able to shoot your shot. So all in all, make sure that you can be fast-paced, know how to cross-promote your skills, get yourself on LinkedIn and start connecting with anyone and everyone associated with cannabis and getting involved in their discussions. Just sending friend requests is not enough. And lastly, really just be able to advocate for yourself. Be open. Be willing to pay your dues. And if you do, you might find a lot of success that way because amazing things can come if you know how to properly sell yourself and what strengths to play to. And if you know the right people, especially that can help give you that little extra boost, it makes all the difference. And it can be a life-changing opportunity if you play your cards right and manage to let yourself stand out as much as you possibly can. With that said, if you ever need anything, Coral does know how to contact me. Please let her know. She is also an amazing source to go to for any kind of connections, resources, or even just having her share job opportunities with you. Because when I lost my job, she was fantastic at helping me connect and try to earn these other opportunities, even if they didn't pan out. But best of luck to you all. I know you're going to do wonderful things within the cannabis industry. Just stay resilient, stay persistent, and keep fighting the good fight. If your passions are aligned, the right people will see you. Just don't give up. Thank you.